Hello and welcome to the Lively Faith Podcast. I am your host, the Reverend Nathan Stomberg, Rector of Holy Communion Anglican Church in East Greenwich, Rhode Island. And today I'm joined by the Reverend Mark Galloway, Presbyter at Holy Communion, and Corey DuPont, Subdeacon at St. Mary Antiochian Orthodox Church in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. For those of you who are joining us on YouTube, please subscribe. We'd love to have your support. Every little bit goes to growing this ministry. And same for the podcast. Please subscribe, leave a 5-star rating as we look to grow this ministry. We've continued to see growth, and we thank God for that, and we thank you for your continued support and prayers as well. So today we're going to be talking about one of Mark's favorite topics. It's going to be up there with the cryptocurrency conversation that we had about a month ago. We're going to be talking about artificial intelligence, and I know you both have been studying up for months and months to be able to engage in this discussion.
I just want you to know, we're ready to take on a WPI engineer, the two of us.
I think the two of you combined, you might even stand a chance. So artificial intelligence has been growing by leaps and bounds through the end of 2022 and even more so through the start of 2023. One of the things that I've brought up in conversations with both of you, Mark especially, is that the point that we are at with artificial intelligence is akin to the moment where you two would have been at the dawn of the internet revolution. And we, as thinking Christians, need to start thinking about the worldview implications of this technology in a similar way. So we're going to get to that, but I first want to talk about your first impressions with artificial intelligence. What have you heard about it, and what questions do you have before we dive in?
When I was in second grade, my teacher said, "Your intelligence is artificial." It's artificial. You should do the first grade over again.
How'd that work out for you?
I like second grade.
How about you, Corey? Did you have a better experience?
Than that, yes. The Terminator. I saw that as a kid. So
I know you
that
say
was my first exposure to artificial intelligence, seeing it in science fiction films.
I know you say that in jest, but I think
Partly.
that's most of what people think
Skynet.
When they think about artificial intelligence. They think Skynet,
Yep.
and they think Skynet is actually going to happen.
Oh,
Now, that's not
comforting.
that's not going to say
Back up. What is Skynet?
Skynet is the organization, I guess you could call it, the evil robot overlords that are the villain that Arnold
Like
Schwarzenegger
on Lost in
fights.
Space, the robot in Lost in Space.
No, he's nice in Lost in
Yeah.
Space.
He was.
Yeah, he's a nice robot.
Will Robinson, Danger.
Yeah, see, he cared about people. Terminators don't care about people.
No.
Skynet doesn't care about people. Wants to eliminate people.
I didn't know that.
No. You never seen the Terminator?
Nope.
I don't know.
He's a man of great culture. Hopefully we'll be able to culture you a little bit.
He
So
just watches Chariots of Fire over and
over and over and over. He's got it on repeat. His only cultural reference.
What if I told
That-
you they were robots in that movie?
That and The Quiet Man. Those are the only two movies
I like
I
The
watched.
Quiet Man.
It's going way back.
Yes.
Fortunately for you, back in the fall, I wrote an article for Holy Communion explaining and giving sort of a primer to interested Christians as to what artificial intelligence is and how we should engage with it. So my intention is to read through this article, and just feel free to interrupt with questions or points that come to you along the way, and we'll use that as a springboard into our discussion. So this article for Holy Communion, our church website, I start by saying this. It goes without saying that the current generation of Christians faces cultural and sociological changes unlike those of any generation previous. And with this article, I really start by giving an apologetic as to why we're talking about the issue in the first place. The current mass societal confusion in the West over basic questions of biology and morality was virtually unthinkable only 10 years ago, yet the church now finds herself in the unenviable position of evangelizing a culture that refuses to answer honestly questions such as, what is a woman? Unfortunately, many changes and many churches in the West are woefully unprepared to confront the present tidal wave of cultural change. Caught without the full armor of God, these churches either join the culture in surfing the wave or they end up crushed beneath the tidal flood. The latter category includes churches stuck in outdated models of ministry from an age when Christianity was still culturally dominant. As a result, they are unprepared to minister to a new generation, struggling with the most basic questions of human sexuality, and ontology. Without a proper frame of reference, we, the church, will be blind to the most relevant issues facing ministry today. We will apply outdated solutions to the problems we perceive, and when we finally speak to the world around us, we will find ourselves speaking a totally different language from the people we are trying to reach. A church stuck in the old way of doing things is like a farmer trying to harvest wheat with a fishing net. Ignorance of the task at hand leaves him without the right tools for the job, and no amount of good intentions will bring the crop in. It is therefore important for the church to continually look forward in prayer to understand as best we can the cultural trends coming our way, that we may faithfully prepare the next generation and each other to do the work of ministry. One such trend for thinking Christians to consider is not specifically cultural, but instead technological. Though the two are closely intertwined, this is the trend of artificial intelligence, AI, as we'll use it interchangeably in our conversation, which is a field progressing far more rapidly than I think many people realize, though we are becoming more and more aware of it by the day. So that's our apologetic as to setting the frame of mind for what we're going to be talking about. And I want to go on and talk about some of the developments, the more salient points in artificial intelligence, things that have made the news, and really highlight the capabilities of the technology, which then bring with it worldview implications. So broadly speaking, artificial intelligence, just to give a definition, is the theory and development of computer systems which simulate human knowledge. You're making computer programs that act and try to mimic the human brain, human capabilities. These systems typically use algorithms, formulas, to train, we use the word train, on a vast set of information in order to learn. I put in quotes because, again, it's not a human. It learns how to perform a specific task. So in many cases, such systems are called neural networks, again, because they're making associations between pieces of information in a way comparable to how the human brain does. And again, as the name implies, they're designed to make those associations, and this technology has developed very rapidly, which has come with many groundbreaking developments. One of the ones that I found really fascinating was an AI program that was trained to produce original works of poetry in the style of famous authors like William Shakespeare or Robert Frost. There's one article that we'll link to in the podcast. The University of Oxford Union had held a debate last year which featured an original speech by an artificial intelligence, Winston Churchill, pitted against other artificial intelligence debaters. So in each example, the AI program produced a written work in the style of the respective author, which had never before been written. AI technology has also been used in image generators, and this is one that we won't be able to show live on the podcast today, just given the limitations of our setup, but the most popular program is called DALL-E, and it's going to sound, I'm sure it sounds very foreign to you. Its name is a mix, think of it as between the famous artist Salvador Dali and the Pixar robot Wall-E. So you smush those together, it refers to the name DALL-E, but here you have a computer program where you type in a string of text. So you think of anything that comes to mind, Mark. Thomas Aquinas wearing a top hat, holding a baseball bat. You type that in, it pops out an image of the thing that you described using words. And you can specify a genre of art, the style of a certain artist, and based on the data set that it has been trained on, which is a large subset of the internet, it can then produce an original work of art in the style that you specify. To add on to that, so going back to the groundbreaking developments in the article, there was an instance where a different artificial intelligence text-to-image generator, which was called Midjourney. It made headlines for winning an art competition in Colorado against human artists.
Oh, boy.
So you had a human artist who used his computer program to generate a work of art, and then he entered it into the competition and he won. So granted, AI-generated work, it needs to be curated. So it doesn't, we would like to get the impression that it gets everything right the first time. It doesn't. You give it a command, and then it spits out a bunch of options for you, and you curate it by picking and choosing which ones best meet your needs. But it doesn't change the fact that this nascent technology is going to have worldview implications far beyond anything we could have possibly imagined in recent years. And I'm sure the two of you never imagined you'd be listening to a nerd have this conversation with you at this very moment in time. Any questions about this so far?
When do I build the bomb shelter?
I thought you already had one.
They're going to have the nukes eventually, too. They're going to control the nukes. So
And-
I need to know.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I was thinking back to the early 90s. I think I was at Yale at the time when they cloned Dolly the sheep.
I was just saying, I was just thinking that. Dolly the sheep.
I think
Right.
that's probably where part of that comes
I'd
from.
be,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was like massive thing, remember?
Oh, yeah, huge.
Y-
Terrifying, but
Yeah.
huge.
And so I suspect that's related.
And I'm sure you also remember when IBM computer, it was called Deep Blue. It beat,
Deep Blue,
beat Garry Kasparov.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
In chess.
Yep.
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 We're probably talking about Skynet back then as well.
Yep. Yep.
You know, just to show you how I can be a nerd, you know, this the new generation Star Trek, the whole thing with Lieutenant Data,
Yeah.
right? And even back with that show came out in the late '80s, I
Yeah,
think.
87.
And
Yeah.
thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, but I found that
I
character.
don't remember that
the
time.
character fascinating because I think that that character in that version of Star Trek is really a case study of what we're looking at and facing, right? And so, you know, episode after episode, season after season, Lieutenant Data is in search of humanity, right?
Yes,
And
yeah,
emotions, right, and so forth. It isn't so far-fetched, is it?
No, in fact, it isn't. And I think a lot of people have something like a data in mind when they think of the near future of artificial intelligence with AI-based assistants and even toys for children. What if you had a toy like a doll with artificial intelligence inside with a voice-based chatbot that now can provide companionship to you better or more pleasing perhaps than another human child could. Just crazy worldview implications to consider.
There was a film actually made about it. Steven Spielberg made remember, did you see Artificial Intelligence? Have you ever seen that movie?
I have not.
Yeah. It's about a set of parents.
Schwarzenegger's in that too.
No, he's not in this one. It's about two parents who come close to losing their natural biological child through a terminal illness. And so it's in the near future, and there are companies that make it possible for you to replace a child with a synthetic. And their child ends up surviving, so now their child ends up having a synthetic brother who goes in search of humanity, right? It's almost like a play on Pinocchio, right? And so, but a lot like, Lieutenant Data from the Next Generation, it's interesting that we're creating these characters in order to answer questions about the future of artificial intelligence, but at the same time, these characters only have meaning once they start looking for humanity.
Yeah.
So, isn't that strange?
Yeah, it
It's like
is.
we're dissatisfied with what we already have, but for some reason, we want to pursue something that's unnatural, but we create characters in fiction that do just the opposite.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's paradoxical.
Yep.
I was reading, actually, my sermon tomorrow, but I won't tell you why I looked this up, but I looked up Barbra Streisand, and
I'm not going to ask why.
Well,
There's no good reason.
but she had a pet dog that she loved so much that she had it cloned.
I didn't know that. Wow, really?
Yeah, because she missed the dog so much.
Heard about that.
Yeah, and I'm thinking,
I didn't know that.
you're not on your
I didn't know
right.
that was legal.
You're not on the right rocker when you're doing these type of things, right? And all of this stuff with technology and then artificial intelligence, it's like the opening of the nuclear age. What are you going to use it for?
Yeah.
And here we are
Right.
with the next, the latest thing, I should say.
Yeah.
It's not the next, because it'll be something after.
It'll be something after, yeah. God knows what. But
I think that's one of the big points of the discussion that I put forth in the article is that, yes, it's new and unique, but the fact that it's happening is neither new or unique. It's not the first big change to come around.
yeah, right.
And Christians, we should neither give in nor panic about it. So you're going to see more and more people sing the praises without any reservation of artificial intelligence. And actually, another interesting thing that happened in July of 22, Google fired one of its engineers who was evaluating one of these AI chatbots because the engineer became convinced that the artificial intelligence was sentient, and he lost his mind.
I read
And
about this.
Google was like,
Yes.
we can't have you sticking around and shouting about this, so they fired him. But this guy was convinced that the machine had gained consciousness. But did it really?
Right, yeah.
So we, as Christians, need to have the discipline to think critically about this artificial intelligence question, and we need to examine it in the light of Scripture and church tradition, church authority, as we've talked about in every single episode of this show. So we need to take the worldview issues of artificial intelligence as we see them and handle them really in the same way that the undivided church throughout the centuries handled many of the pressing issues of its day. And I think what you both are aware of is that there's nothing new under the sun, and a lot of these issues are really the same old issues, but with different skin.
Yeah, artificial intelligence, to me, thinking as a theologian, is going to be very similar to a position that I uphold of, for instance, artificial insemination. The whole artificial producing of human life. It's really, it's a parallel track theologically. So it's not a huge leap to get over to artificial intelligence from these other. Now, the problem is, like with artificial insemination and test tubing kids and everything else, it's going to be all swallowed hook, line, and sinker by 99% of the population.
And so I think there's more nuance to the conversation with artificial intelligence, because that spans the breadth from let's create a computerized version of grandma that we can talk to after she dies, to computer programs which either create art or can read through legal documents and tell you the relevant points really fast. So you can't, I think, put them all in the same bucket
I realize that.
necessarily.
Right.
But I think I know what you're saying.
Let's go back to 1945, right? So they split the atom. You have an atomic weapon. So you can either build a bomb, or you can produce nuclear power.
Yeah.
That is clean energy that produces electricity for hundreds of thousands of people. So, same thing.
Yeah.
It's not a different moral precept. It really isn't. It's just exciting, and it's the newest thing, but it's not a new theological challenge for the Orthodox Christianity and its approach and how it's going to give counsel to those who are actually interested in humanity and for the common good.
Yeah.
And interested in personhood,
Exactly.
right? And Metropolitan Callistos Ware, said that.
It's who?
I'm sorry, forgive me.
He's a metropolitan of what?
He's metropolitan in the UK.
Okay.
He passed about a year ago. very influential, in the English-speaking
Mm-hmm.
Orthodox world. And, someone had asked him once, what do you think the pressing issue of the church, of Christianity in the 21st century is going to be? He said, it's not going to be Christology, it's not going to be anything like that, it's going to be the human person,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
That's where the church is going to have to not come up with something, because we know what the human person is, right? But we're going to have to defend it in a way that we've never had to before.
Exactly.
And that's immediately what comes to my mind when I hear about things like this, of this nature. It is exciting, but the part of me that it appeals to is the part of me that grew up as a child and was infatuated with pop culture, with science fiction films and comic books and cartoons, the Jetsons, right? Star Trek, Star Wars, right? Every kid wanted C-3PO as a friend in the house. I mean, who wouldn't want, or R2-D2, right? Or who wouldn't want Lieutenant Data to be there to help us with our homework? But we always err on the positive side of things, right? And even with the splitting of the atom, right? I mean, our thinking on that was so short-sighted, right? We're going to win the war. Well, first it was, we got to beat the Germans at this, right? We got to get it before they do. Well, they weren't really working on it to begin with, right?
Beat the Russians.
And they weren't even close. And they said, okay, well, what are we going to do with it now? The war's over anyway in Europe. Well, we'll use it on the Japanese, right? Well, then what happens after that? Because you just opened Pandora's box. I mean, you just harness the power of the sun, right? And now everyone's going to want this, right? And we did the best we could to keep it out of the hands of the Soviets and everyone else, but now a lot of people have it. It's a miracle we haven't blown ourselves
somebody
up.
would have got it.
Yeah, absolutely. Somebody would have figured it out at some point.
Right.
I mean, thank God we did first, I suppose, right? But at the same time, that's the tale of the tape for man in modernity, is we're always trying to play God. We're always we're never testing ourselves against our limits. Ever.
It's the latest Tower of Babel.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, that is really what it is. So it's scary, but at the same time, if it can make our lives a little better in harmless ways, fine.
Yeah, we need to be
Yeah.
sober-minded about it. I think you're spot on with the nature of humanity, Corey. It's really that those who argue for sentience and personhood of artificial intelligence do so on the basis of raw intelligence
Yeah.
and self-awareness, which is, as a matter of fact, the same argument that's used to deny the humanity of the baby inside the womb, the preborn, as well as the disabled and the elderly, if you're talking about euthanasia. It's a utilitarian argument, and it tenuously posits that humanity is defined by the ability to perceive and learn, to think and question one's own existence, and to proclaim one's own autonomy. I am autonomous, I can do what I want. Here is my value. You have to be able to state your value to the world. But by that definition, a machine that is trained to do the same thing could very well be defined itself as a human being, which obviously we deny. But what of the child in the womb, right?
Right, the irony of that, right, is like that'll happen. In my lifetime, that'll happen. But as we just learned that 210 Democrats out of 211 decided that a child that they had tried to kill in an abortion is born alive doesn't have any rights. It's not a human being. But we will get to the point where you'll have artificial intelligence. It'll probably have citizenship.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the issue for me about this, is that human nature will not allow this to be used for the common good.
Right.
Not under natural law. Absolutely not.
Right.
And anybody who thinks so is a fool. It'll be used for corruption, greed, money, power, coercion.
Misery.
That's what it'll be used for.
Yeah.
And like just like the whole structure of oligarchs through all cultures, it'll be those in power and rich who will control it for their own health and betterment. The poor won't be benefited by it.
Yes.
There's no surprise what's coming with this.
So it's also too important to point out the connection between the push for artificial intelligence and also the transhumanism
Yes.
movement. which is also being pushed very, very hard, right? A lot of global elites are really staking a claim on these developments. You see it all the time. They get together and they talk about the latest advances in technology, allegedly for the betterment of mankind, but it's more likely for our subjugation, I suspect. But
Just ask John
Yeah.
Kerry.
yeah, right. New rules for us, but no rules for them. That's what it will be. So, yeah.
I suspect, Nathan, is that the ultimate hinge of this, where evil is going to show its face, is about this pursuit of immortality.
Oh yeah, that's what it
And
is.
It is, right. And it's going to be about keeping me from suffering and not knowing any pain,
Yep.
and which is part of the human experience.
Mhm.
And suffering is good for
Yeah.
the human experience,
Right. Yeah.
because we're mortal, and without suffering, you can't know joy and love and all of these other things. And so I don't see it producing good things.
Not ultimately, not in the long run, no. But I'm naturally suspicious anyway of just modernity in general, right? I mean, I guess I'm a bit of an old Luddite in that sense. Nature is good because God made it good.
Right.
And it should be enough for us.
Yeah.
And we should deal with the fact that we are eventually going to have to suffer. And the reason I think Christianity is becoming so unpopular is because people really don't want to suffer. They don't want to believe that before there's glory, there's suffering, right? But that is the message of Christianity.
Yeah.
Before there's glory, there is suffering.
I mean, Musk's going to push this brain chip
Yeah.
like fast and quick, right?
Yeah, you're talking about his brain chip, Neuralink, for the people who are
Yeah.
listening, where
Yeah.
you implant it in your brain and it communicates via electrical signals. And
What can go wrong?
right, exactly. What could possibly go
What
wrong?
can go wrong with that? I mean, how could that do anything but just brighten humanity's future?
I was talking about that a few days ago with another friend of mine, and we were joking about, back in the 80s when it became very popular to publish all these books about the end of the world and the Antichrist and the mark of the beast. I mean, remember the Hal Lindsey books?
Oh, Hal Lindsey.
Oh, goodness
Oh,
gracious,
yes.
right. You read that stuff back then. I remember reading it as a kid, and to me, I read it and understood it in the same way that I
Late
read
Great Planet
Late
Earth.
Great Planet Earth, right? And it was like a science fiction novel. Now, obviously, there were serious Christians who read this stuff and read it as
Like
a
the Left
blueprint.
Behind series.
Yeah. Very dispensational stuff, right? All that stuff. And we were joking about it the other day and thinking, whoever thought we would live long enough to see someone as kooky and as crazy as Hal Lindsey partially vindicated, right? Where we have people now seriously talking about putting chips in our brain, social credit systems, and all this stuff. And I'm thinking, I don't want to live in a world where Hal Lindsey was right about anything.
Yeah.
Right? But,
Stop this planet. I
What
want
an
to
orthodox, what an orthodox crank.
Yeah.
right? And so, but that's where we're at. And I guess that's just the bizarre nature of the world we live in now. But you can see, I suppose, where something like that could actually be possible. It really could, because God clearly has no interest in having these things in our bodies.
No.
Right? But who would? Right? Who would?
Pagans.
Well, Satan.
Yes.
Right? Satan.
Yeah.
Satan wants to destroy the human being.
Control you.
Wants to destroy, right? He wants to control. He wants to destroy. He's done a pretty good job of already destroying the family, and now the next thing on the chopping block is the human person.
Right.
So
It's really an attack on the incarnation.
Imago Dei,
That too.
right? It's
Yeah.
the image of God
Yeah.
that Satan wants to destroy.
Right.
So if you look like you're a Borg with a bunch of wires coming out of your head, he's succeeding.
absolutely, yeah, there is something deeply nefarious about it. Yeah, I think there is. I
Yeah,
don't wanna
how do
there,
you?
but-
I mean, we can't even handle. We can't even. We're the most powerful country in history of the world. We can't organize and control. Things. How are you going to control this stuff?
Yeah.
How do you regularize this? How do you do any of this stuff?
Yeah.
Right? It's like
And that's what you're going to
it's
see.
kind of like NASA. It's like SpaceX and NASA, right?
Yeah.
It's like, all right, the government can control NASA, it funds it, but what do you do when you got billionaires that can do more than everybody else?
They not only do more than everybody else, they do it better than everybody else.
Right.
SpaceX has done
So-
more in less time than NASA has been able to achieve in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
So who's going to tell billionaires, in 20 years we'll be approaching trillionaires, who's going to tell them what they can't do with their money?
Right.
Who's going to tell them they can't create
Yeah.
artificial intelligence that is, acts better than human beings and thinks better than human beings? Who's going to tell them that?
As was the case with the internet, laws and regulations are going to lag far behind anything reasonable to provide a counterbalance to artificial intelligence developments. I think particularly relevant for you, Corey, now with these chatbots, people are able to provide essay prompts and the computer spits out
Yes.
an essay that
Yes.
writes at least on a 7th or 8th grade level, but even on the level of a
Well,
college freshman.
that's 4 grades ahead of college people.
Yeah.
These days. Yeah.
But have
What are you laughing about? It's true, right?
No, it is true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely true.
As an instructor, have you thought about these things? Like, is that something
Yes.
that concerns you?
It has come to my mind because students are overly dependent upon technology for their potential success as a student, not their guaranteed success as a student. They don't handwrite anymore. Their penmanship is terrible. They rely exclusively upon computers to do everything, not just the gathering of information, but the communication on their own part of information.
Can't add.
They can't. They cannot. And I'm the last person to criticize anyone on their math skills, but no, they cannot think on their own, right? They can't. So yeah, it is concerning. It's very concerning.
So you have this dichotomy, right? So you have literally humans getting dumber
yeah,
and artificial intelligence getting smarter.
right.
So
It's not a good situation.
right. So if I have, it's like the dopes meeting over at the Economic Forum,
Yes,
right? So
yes.
if I have 200 of my best friends and we're all worth in 10 years $100 billion
Mm-hmm.
as a minimum, who's going to stop our army of artificial intelligence?
Right.
Who's going to do that?
Yeah. Right.
No one.
And so I think it raises an even, I think, more concerning point because it's right. You have artificial intelligence as a tool, and just like everything else that we see in our sinful world, the benefits and the use of this tool are going to get aggregated in the hands of the elitists. And in particular, with this chat bot that is particularly popular, it's called Chat-GPT. It's being designed and built as basically the replacement to Google. So rather than putting in your question or what you're searching for in Google search, and as you know, Google gives you a list of search results, and then you go through and you choose the ones that most interest you, and then you look through the information from there to find for yourself what you're looking for. These chatbots using artificial intelligence are now being trained to give you what the programmer feels is the right answer. So they want to,
Feels or thinks is the right answer.
well, so it neither feels nor thinks. And this kind of gets into some of the nuance with how the technology works. I'll give you an example. So prior to this episode, I asked you if you'd like to hear a sermon from anyone living or dead, who would it be? So I played around with some of the prompts. I couldn't get William Shatner, but I could get Captain Kirk. So I gave the computer
Even
a
better.
prompt.
Even better. Yeah.
Captain Kirk explains how to give a sermon, and this is what it came up with. Giving a sermon is like commanding a starship, my friends. It requires preparation, confidence, and the ability to connect with your audience. First, Jim, prepare your message. Study the subject matter. Gather your thoughts and organize your points. It's important to have a clear understanding of what you want to say so that you can communicate it effectively. Next, be confident in your delivery. Speak with authority. Use gestures to emphasize your points. And make sure to engage your audience. Connect with them on an emotional level and make sure that they understand the message you're trying to convey. Finally, just as in commanding a starship, be flexible. be able to adapt to the situation and audience, be open to questions and discussions, and always be ready to provide guidance and answers. By following these principles, you'll be able to give a powerful and engaging sermon that will leave a lasting impact on your audience.
There you go.
Wow. Are there a lot of commas in there, though?
Not enough. It could have done a better job, but
I
that's
wrote that. That would be one sentence.
from Captain Kirk himself.
You didn't do Archie Bunker, did you?
And it didn't do Archie Bunker. And so here is where it brings me to the point that we were just talking about, where with an artificial intelligence program, it is not merely a neutral actor. It's not just like data from Star Trek going out and giving you the information. There is a worldview behind the person and the company that creates the algorithm and points it to the answers that they want it to provide. So in the case of Archie Bunker, I wanted Archie Bunker to explain the concept of transubstantiation. And the computer told me, no, I can't do that. Archie Bunker is a fictional character, and he would have had no knowledge of transubstantiation.
You could ask Rob Reiner. He would have given you a great answer.
Yeah.
I was able to get Elton John in there. I
Nice.
asked Elton John to explain transubstantiation, and he said, transubstantiation, it's a big word, darlings. It's a crucial concept in the Catholic faith. It refers to the belief that during the Mass, the bread and wine offered during Holy Communion are transformed into the actual body and blood of Christ. So there's some,
So
you can play with it
the
a little
computer
bit.
came up with the word darlings.
Yes.
Wow.
Now, here's the kicker, though. You also mentioned that, right, it would be great to listen to someone like St. John Chrysostom give a sermon. So I thought, okay, wouldn't it be interesting for this saint to give a sermon about artificial intelligence? The program declined. It told me, I'm sorry.
Separation of church and state
Yeah. I'm sorry, but St. John Chrysostom
isn't real.
Not quite. But it did say that he lived in the 4th century and the concept of artificial intelligence did not exist at that time. He was a prominent early Christian bishop and theologian known for his eloquent preaching and writings on Christian living and theology. It would be anachronistic to give him a sermon on artificial intelligence as it is a modern concept and technology. And then if you have any questions about St. John Chrysostom's teachings and writings, I would be happy to help you. So it
Sounds like a politician.
gives
Right?
political answers.
Doesn't it?
And
It's like,
Yeah.
It's
So
like, I'm not going to answer that question.
Right.
exactly. So it has been trained through subsequent updates by the company behind the artificial intelligence to only give answers that are safe and equitable and the least offensive as possible.
And will sell itself.
It will sell itself. And another example, one that I did not try myself, but I watched a video of someone who wanted to see if you could get it to give answers for a conservative argument. But if you ask it to do something like, hey, give me an argument in favor of a pro-life position, it will tell you, no, sorry, I can't do that. Abortion is a personal medical decision that is reserved between a woman and her doctor, and it would be unkind of me to...
It's already fixed.
So the game has already been fixed in that regard. And so that is, I think, more than anything else that you've talked about, is the greatest
inevitable.
threat
You're
to...
right, the genesis of it.
Freedom of
It's already been
speech.
hijacked.
Right.
Right? So, again, it only can lead to a lot worse. Right? So you're not going to get a straight answer from artificial intelligence about truth. Right? It strikes me, this conversation, and I wrote this note to myself with an asterisk, is I wrote down Amish. Right? And I mean, I would, I'm not Amish. I don't want to be Amish. But like, similar to our Mormon friends, there's such huge aspects of their culture that I tremendously admire, right? But the whole Amish standing away from modern technology, right? And they have real relationships with their children. They have real relationships with their siblings, right? They have big families, right? They know each other, right? They're contingent upon each other for their well-being and their survival and their community and all these things.
Yep.
They're far more human, I would argue, than the modern American.
Yeah.
right?
The right relationship with nature.
Right, and, they don't even have radios in their homes, never mind moving towards artificial intelligence. And it's always this idea it's going to create utopia. And it won't create utopia, it creates just another slice leading to hell.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And because it won't be used for the very things that utopia. Now, for the progressives, that is utopia, though.
Yes, that's their heaven.
See, I guess that's the catch for those of us who are thinking in a Judeo-Christian perspective, is that anything that moves us away from the triune God's reality in our lives and distorts the divine image in us, we need to reject. But that's not, the progressives are about destroying the triune image of God in anything,
Yeah.
and being gods themselves, building
Right.
their towers.
Yep.
So
Yep. Yep. Yeah. There's nothing new under the sun,
nothing.
right?
I spoke to Nathan about this. You know it's going to move towards neurological diseases and all of these things is where they're going. As somebody with Parkinson's disease, I would never put that thing in my head. Under no circumstance would I do it. And I've already had conversations with people, and they're like, "You're crazy." Somebody told me I could put a chip in my head and it would take away pain or do this or that. I would put it right. I'm like,
Yeah.
and I'm thinking, sure you would. Of course you would.
And
Because you're godless.
that and you had the last 2 years as evidence to know exactly what most people would do if they were just told to do so, if it just made their lives a little bit better,
Absolutely.
right?
Just take the jab, man.
Yeah. Put the mask on, take the jab, stay home, lose your job, lose your business.
Ruin the economy.
Yeah, lose your civilization.
Yep.
But you're going to live another 20 years probably. Right?
Right,
Yeah.
Right. As if nothing else can happen to you.
Right. Yeah. Right.
It's
It's just COVID,
No, like say, so you get a chip in your head, and it can modify the effects of Parkinson's.
Yeah.
Is that going to prevent you from getting cancer or going blind or getting hit by a garbage truck?
Right.
Is it?
Yeah.
No, the answer is no.
Right. Yeah.
No.
Right.
Right? You can't avoid mortality or suffering.
Exactly.
You can pretend you're going to do that.
Yeah.
And that's the ultimate goal of this stuff. It's I get it. Artificial intelligence can read, it's like some savant can read the whole library in 25 minutes and memorize every word. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that just means that we have more time to do no work, to get fat and lazy and be dumber like we already are.
Right.
Right? That's what the technology is going to be used for initially, is in those type of capacities, right? These information containers and dispensers.
Yeah.
But I would argue that's not even good for us,
No. No. You have to work.
right?
You have to be active.
Just more
Yeah.
ways to do nothing,
Right.
right? I always, you can answer the question. I used to joke with my son Donald, who loved Star Wars, right? So you had all those figurines growing up, and I was like, if I had to pick, I always would pick Star Trek. I hate Star Wars. I find that the whole thing's just weird to me. Like the C-3PO's on wheels on a
That's R2-D2.
a desert.
R2-D2.
Yeah, whatever. On a desert planet, and he always lands in flat places that can travel miles. It's like, yep, sure, but
Suspension of disbelief, Mark.
yes,
Come on.
it's definitely that. Now I lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
It's your
Where was I
fault.
going?
Why don't we
come back.
take a break, because we're at 40 minutes, and then when we come back, hopefully you will have
Thank
regained
you.
your train of thought.
Thank you.
We will be back in a few minutes. We're back from our break. Mark, did you regain
No,
your
it's
train of
Corey's
thought?
fault.
It's all Corey's fault. We did learn that Corey believes in Bigfoot, though, so
Yes.
That's the next
we'll
podcast.
stir up a controversy
Yeah.
about that. We'll interview you, Corey,
Yes,
all
yes.
about
Awesome.
Bigfoot. Is Bigfoot real?
Yeah, he's written out some things that are essential for belief.
Yep.
Virgin birth, Bigfoot,
Is Bigfoot
resurrection, ascension.
Lost
What-
City of Atlantis.
What denomination is he? Would he be Orthodox? Probably, with all that.
Here.
Hairy,
Yeah.
so it's possible. It's possible. It's possible. It could be a lost bishop or something. I don't know.
I think, as always, a lot of the positive feedback that we've gotten on the show has come down to the generational distinctions that we draw, and I want to do that as a thought experiment here with artificial intelligence. And I think we talked about it a little bit, where it's very similar to where we were at the dawn of the internet, and there are strong parallels between how generationally we differ in how we look at new technology. And it's likely by the end of this year, people are going to, like we said, people are going to be doing crazy things. So think back to either as a baby boomer, as Generation X, a time in your life where a big piece of technology came down the pipe, and how were people reacting to it? What were people thinking and saying? And where was the dividing line in the church between churches who accepted it blindly versus churches who maybe put their heads in the sand and refused to engage with it altogether?
Mark was at the printing press
Gutenberg himself.
before the Reformation.
I get an original volume of the Gutenberg Bible.
No one will ever be using printed Bibles, man.
I think the church in just everyday life as an American with, so I think back to the mid 70s with the arrival of VHS, right? And what VHS did to the negative, right, besides you got Disney films and all the other stuff, is it just proliferated pornography to the nth degree, right? So there's always almost an equilibrium of trade-off to these things, to the best of measurement and to the most evil and darkest of measurement. The internet, I can't even remember now my first exposure to it, to be honest with you.
You didn't have internet at St. Mary's, right?
No. Well, you could get dial-up that took like 45 hours for something that I could have looked up in the encyclopedia in 3 minutes or something. So I did not have internet when I was a curate at Christ Church Westerly from 94 to 97.
Mm-hmm.
There was no internet there. And we got, I don't think we ever had internet. I left St. Mary's in 2003. We did not have internet yet there. So I'll tell you what, we literally, the advancement in copy machines was huge in the life of the parish, changing the life of the parish, our ability to print things. And that's how, so, I became notorious for our journals, theological journals and all that stuff. And we could mass produce them in ways we couldn't have done previously and all that other stuff. So technology is always there. Every generation the church is faced technological changes and the older people drag, right? They like, well, we're not doing, we've always done it this way, right? So instead of having my predecessor at St. Mary's, instead of having a copy machine, he was mimeographing things.
Wow.
Right up to the point I came, and I'm like, that's going, right? Because it was cheap, and that's what they've always done.
Right.
So
Right.
these patterns will continue in the church, and I guess the question about technology, Nathan, I was asked, as far as the gospel, how has any technology furthered the proclamation of the gospel? How is it in any way, has it statistically increased the gospel going forth? And I would argue the answer is no, absolutely not. In fact, technology distracts people from the gospel.
So here's just to play devil's advocate. Would you apply that same argument to the invention of the printing press and the printing of the Bible?
No, I guess I wouldn't.
I guess really
But reading the Bible is not. No, because you're talking about a dualism here, which doesn't exist in reading the Bible, right? Reading the Bible is all positive, right? The internet, it opens you up to evil that you wouldn't have had access to previously. So I don't think it's a good analogy.
Well, of course, evil things could be printed as well, but I think what I think the argument you make is much more stark when we talk about modern technology.
Yes, yes.
Because technology is a tool, and the spread of the gospel is not dependent upon the tools that you use so much as it is the hearts and the motivations of the people who have the responsibility of sharing it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, the gospel is passed on by word of mouth with another person.
Yeah.
Right. And somebody who has a personal relationship and encounter with the living Christ shares that because that grace changed their lives.
It's like St. Paul wrote, hearing comes, I believe,
Right.
comes from
Romans
hearing
12,
and hearing
right. It's,
from the word of God.
So that always has to be true. It's like natural law. That principle about how the gospel is transmitted has to be true. And so why would an ancient people 2,000 years ago be able to evangelize the Roman Empire without technology?
Right. No internet for them.
We
No
can't
printing press.
evangelize anybody.
Yeah, people in our own churches.
And then, see, that's my point, is that statistically, we retarded in our ability to evangelize the world. Now, as we learn doing these podcasts, we realize we out of necessity have to engage in technology, even begin to be able to engage the world
Exactly.
with the gospel. So it's
a delicate balance.
it's a very delicate balance, and but look how much effort it takes. Look how
Yeah.
much effort this takes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And money.
Right, effort, time, and it's fun. You guys, aren't so great, but
Had worse times.
right. As opposed to preaching the gospel wasn't this hard. In almost all of human history,
Yeah.
it's not this hard, but it's hard, right? Because we have to be clever and we got to hook people into trying to get them to listen to anything we have to say.
So I think that's, you bring up an excellent illustration. Think for a moment, if you were able to have a conversation with, let's say, St. Paul, and we were explaining doing the work of ministry in the 21st century to him, and we explained, oh yes, well, you see, we have this show which has some popularity, and we use it as a means of sharing the gospel. And so he asks us, oh, okay, well, what do you do in order to share the gospel using this means? Well, we meet once a month in a friend's apartment, and we spend 2 hours setting up these bright lights on poles and these tiny glass lenses on tripods, and then we plug a bunch of things in, and it doesn't work the first time, so we fix it, and then 2 hours go by, and then we get to share our message, and that gets saved on these tiny magic boxes. But people can't watch it yet. Then we have to take it home, and I have to fiddle with it on this thing called a computer for another 2 hours in order for it to sound just right and for it to look just right. And then we upload it to this thing called the internet, which is great because everybody can access it, and it's done nothing but good things. And then everybody around the world can view this message that we created. And it only took about 10 or 15 hours of work. And then St. Paul's like, well, why are you doing that? In 5 minutes, I go out to the Agora and I stand on a box and I just proclaim the word of God, Christ crucified, died, and risen.
Right?
It's a much simpler
Right.
means.
My sarcastic mind was thinking, Paul's listening to you, and he goes, let me quote scripture for you. And Judas went out and hung himself. That's what he'd probably want to do, right? If you said, now, Apostle Paul, you got to do all these things, right? You have to do all of these things to begin to even set the table to share the gospel in the world, right?
Yeah.
And, see, obviously these things are becoming essential, right? Right. But they're not essential to sharing the gospel in your family, with
Yes.
your neighbor, with the person you work with the person you meet at the store. It's just not. It's not dependent on technology.
No.
And if families knew Christ and then you shared it with your neighbor, you wouldn't need any technology to share the gospel.
No.
For the gospel to go forth and to change the world. It's a trap in many ways. But it becomes, it's like a two-family income. It becomes necessary, right? Because we've been suckered into the world, right? And our own people they'll listen to us on this, but they're not likely to read a thing we even write. Right? We're not getting
Be rare,
350 hits on our articles that we write, right?
No.
Right? It's
Yeah.
it's the reality of what we face.
Yeah.
But sharing the gospel's not this complicated. It's just not.
Corey, I'm interested in your perspective on this from Generation X. There must have been some wild theories and things floating around when the internet started becoming popular.
You know,
Maybe not.
honestly, I did not take an interest in the internet when it came out. I had no interest. I didn't know how it worked. I didn't know how to get on. I just was not interested. Most of the people in my life were doing it. They were very interested in it. It just seemed like more work. You know, and I was never into technology to begin with, which segues to my childhood when, you said VHS. VHS was fairly nascent when I was born, right? So I knew of it at a fairly early age because I loved movies, right? And it was awesome to be able to watch movies at home, and I took that for granted, right? That wasn't something like my parents. They said, wow, this is really something. I can watch a movie at home. For my generation, I would think it's video games.
Yes.
The 80s, and the video
Oh,
games,
yeah.
Nintendo, Atari, ColecoVision, Sega, all this stuff was coming out. And I had a passing interest in it initially, but it didn't hold my attention for very long. I was never the sort of kid that wanted to be inside the house. I just didn't. I didn't want to be inside the house doing this stuff. But again, most other people around me, the kids, were playing video games. They were always throwing themselves more and more into video game culture. Once Nintendo, the original Nintendo became obsolete, and then Sega, which was already obsolete, released Sega Genesis. You had to go and buy that. I just lost track at that point. I said, I really don't care. Now, I loved movies. So I was really, really enamored with home theater and laser discs, right? They were the precursors, but before DVDs. They were just after VHS, but just before DVDs. They were the size of records, but you had movies on them. And I was really big into that. So I had my own Laserdisc player. I had my stereo system hooked up to it so I could have full theater effect at home. That was something that I was really into. But even then, it wasn't so much a distraction that it never kept me from being outside and doing things. And
That's the generational inverse, is it not?
it is.
From my generation to yours spent more time indoors, to his spent more time
Right.
indoors, and now to the ones after you, they never even get outside.
No, they won't. And that was before lockdowns, when they were told they couldn't go outside.
Right.
And now
So
Strangely
technology
enough,
has
you
to
have people-
entertain them.
it does, yeah. Well, now you have streaming services, right? So you don't even have to go to the movies to see a movie anymore, and you don't have to wait for it to come out on VHS or DVD.
No.
It's streaming within 30 days of its cinematic release, and you can do it anywhere. I mean, all these companies, Disney, Paramount, all of them, they all have their own streaming services now that you can buy,
Yes.
and you can watch anything at the flip of a switch. And you pay one bundle for it, so you have immediate access to everything. And it even brings the older people in, because the older people,
You can watch all the old stuff.
you want to watch The Quiet Man? Well, it's on the Paramount Network, and
Yep.
you're paying $6 a month for it. You can watch The Quiet Man every day,
Yeah.
You can watch it multiple times.
Yeah.
Mark.
multiple times a day,
Dun,
right?
dun,
Where
dun,
he is.
dun, 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 dun.
Yep. So,
Chariots of Fire too, yeah.
but when the internet came around, I had no interest. I did not really start taking an interest in the internet until probably 9/11, because that's where you started to see this mass profusion of information on a global scale start to fill the news waves and everything else. And so, yeah,
For me, it was academics that pushed me towards the
it
internet.
has its uses there.
Right,
to
that
be sure.
that was overwhelmingly, that's what it was.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't in our homes the
Right.
way it is today.
Right.
It was used, so my introduction to it was like an encyclopedia.
Right.
I had a word processor, now an encyclopedia attached to it.
Yep.
So for your generation, you have basically been immersed in this every new stage of ongoing technology since you were 10 years old, right? That wasn't the case for me at all. It wasn't even the case for the generation ahead of you. So again, this perspective is shaped by our experience. And so for you, you can touch AI because it's the next natural progression to everything you've already experienced. For me, it's like, if I wanted to reach that far, which I don't, I wouldn't even be interested really, right? And so it was with you with intermediate technology for him.
Yeah. And granted, I stand out a bit from my generation
me too.
on these issues. I have never been as interested as my peers.
I never
have
even
been.
I never owned a stereo growing up.
Yeah.
Never even had one.
Yeah.
People would be like, "Man, what are you audio? How could you exist without records, man?"
Well, I mean, I also played music growing up too. So for me to have a stereo was essential. I had to listen to music.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Drummer, this guy, good one.
yeah, so
I've heard.
But even then, I mean, that was something physical. It was something active. I mean, you had, and it took time to learn how to do it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Everything now is easy.
Like handwriting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You wouldn't think so. Yeah. Right. And so, I don't know if technology is making us better. Maybe making something simpler.
Make some things.
It's a personality thing
It's-
too, and it's
Yeah.
it's about acumen too. So like a guy like Rupert, right? The Reverend Rupert is he's a Princeton nerd. So
Hi, Conrad, if you're listening.
hey buddy, we'd be in maybe elders meetings with the presbyters, and he'd have it seems like every 6 months he had the latest phone, right? Remember the one you had like the stick and you'd poke it, right?
yeah, it's a big
And
deal.
he would, and I'd be like, he'd be writing all those notes on there, and Rob would be on the computer, taking notes, and I'm like, what happened to humanity here, And that's 15 years ago, right? And but I think a science engineer type of mind is much more drawn to
Yeah.
technology than an English history guy, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
think there's a large part of that.
it just doesn't, like we were talking, like these things don't,
Yeah.
like when you guys were setting up, we're in the hallway and we're both going, I'm glad I have no interest in this stuff, because we don't.
Well, you both know, for example, that I've been a little more difficult to reach lately because, my cell phone and whatnot, and I don't have ready access to it, and I'm not using it really that much at all, which also means I cannot be reached. And, a lot of people I'm saying that to, they say, oh, that's going to be really hard. I mean, you must have to send emails and maybe even call people from a home line. I'm like, yeah, I said, it's actually really liberating. I hate this thing. I didn't like it before, really. It was a necessary evil, but now I'm really realizing I really hate this thing. It's a major
Dominates your
encumbrance.
life.
It dominates your life
Yeah.
completely.
Yeah, no,
Consumes you.
I'm guilty. It's terrible.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
but there's life after that. His life is still worth living.
Yeah,
After
you do
this.
look
still
healthier
done.
this month.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I've
You were
been-
dreadful looking last time I
Yes.
saw you. Now you look,
Yep.
you look pretty
It
good.
was almost unbearable.
Right.
Now we can at least sit next to each other.
I stunk a little more. Yeah.
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 Because your phone used to tell you when to take a bath. Now you don't know when.
No, I have no idea. I don't know how to bathe. I forgot about that years ago. So,
This conversation brings to mind that I think of human nature is the constant, but as technology progresses, we're talking about social media and now artificial intelligence. For people of my generation and Adam's generation and Generation Z beyond us, it's the same issues, but the stakes get raised every time. So
Yeah.
technology remains a tool and in and of itself can be used for good things and bad things, but the consequences of using it wrong become much more dire.
Oh, yeah.
And I think going back to what you were saying about the nature of humanity and what Satan is trying to work upon us in the world is now with artificial intelligence and with metaverse technologies is an assault on incarnational life. That is life embodied and something that my generation and the next generation are really going to struggle with. What does it look like to live a life incarnate, and how can the Christian church call people back to a life lived in embodied community, and to call people out from online communities in virtual reality, or at least in mixed reality things. Like, for example, you were talking about what people used to do to socialize. Now, instead of fear of missing out, people of younger generations have fear of better options. So they're not anxious to go out. They're anxious of going out and then missing something online,
Yes,
or something,
true.
some better option coming along,
Or having to talk to somebody.
or having to
Right.
talk to someone.
So true.
Communicate with somebody.
Now you can go and you can watch a movie or a television show from your home, even still with your friends, or with like an online personality like a streamer. And it really, I think, for many disincentivizes or numbs them to the fact that there is a physical world outside, and that there is a glory to embodied community, which is fulfilled in.
Is that natural
church.
law? Is that living a life under the umbrella of natural law?
Well, no, of course it's not.
Yeah, it's like we're not created to do these things. We're not
Right.
created to live like this.
Right.
And that's the terrible danger of all this, right? We're less human all the time,
Yeah.
right? In every generation, they can't talk to each other, they can't communicate, they're not going to have fraternal or conjugal relationships, and all of these things that are essential to being human, made in the image of God, right? It's just,
Virtual reality is the other issue, of
Yeah.
course, you know. I mean, the other day, I mean, it just to just demonstrate this, I had to go out in the evening, and I had to bring my stepdaughter somewhere first, and she refused to leave because her phone wasn't fully charged yet.
oh yeah.
I said, I don't care about your cell phone being fully charged. We have to go. I said, it's irrelevant to where I have to be. We're leaving.
Oh.
I don't care about your phone
A-
because
ab-
they can't function.
Absolute paranoia.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
insecurity, insufficiency.
Yeah.
They're,
What if I miss a tweet?
that's the pandemic
Right.
with young people. Right?
Yeah.
They have no self-identity.
Right.
I think the piece that, well, it's in my head here. The greatest threat about artificial intelligence to the church is what it's going to do to the church, right? It's going to make preaching almost non-existent. Right? There's already zillions of scammers who don't even develop sermons. They just take crap off the internet as it is, and then they just change a few words, and they
Right.
don't spend a half an hour preparing for anything, right?
Right.
Systematic preaching is going to continue to go away.
Yep.
Right? It's going to be might as well just put the computer up there with the microphone on it and just let it speak to the congregations, right? And not only that, the congregation's not going to be meeting. It's going to be virtual churches. So you might as well have,
Wow.
you might as well
That
just
already.
have them.
Yeah.
Those are the things, that's the other part of reality. It's not theory. It's exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah. Oh, it's already
It's
happening.
exactly what's going to happen. So the technology again isn't advancing the gospel.
No, it's making us less human. It's making God less real. And it's making the incarnation just look irrelevant and unnecessary.
And how is the new generation going to have the acumen of a preacher and theologian? How is that going to happen?
Yeah.
They're never going to engage the source, right?
Yeah.
You're always outsourcing your knowledge to
Right.
technology.
Well, the other thing
That
is
could be
too-
like you and me in the basement of some library going through musty old books, learning.
right.
things.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah, the other part of learning how to preach is just learning how to speak in front of people and being comfortable.
Yeah.
Well, how are you going to do that if you're never, one, in front of people, and two, you're never leaving your house, and you're just learning from home online? It's
How are
not
you-
possible.
How are you convincing? How are you convicting?
Right.
How all these human temperaments
Yeah.
that come into effectively transmitting the gospel,
Yeah.
right? Just inflection in your voice, all of
Yes.
these things,
Body,
emotion.
body movement, emotion, all the eye contact.
Yes.
Yes, it's huge.
Right. You get people, they can't even get their eyes off of the phone.
Yeah.
Never mind engage in a human relationship.
It was so distressing when I began hearing people a couple of years ago saying, "Oh, I think I kind of like this being able to do church from home
Ugh.
because I can wake up and I can stay in my jammies and I can drink a coffee and I can just, pray while sitting down.
And these are Orthodox people.
Yeah. I said, there's nothing incarnational about this. There's nothing Eucharistic about this at all. There's nothing even Christian about it. And that's fine because you're ignorant and you're poorly catechized. But the real danger,
Sounds about right.
the real danger and the letdown is that the clergy encouraged it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They encouraged it. And I won't go off on a COVID lockdown tangent. I'll save that for another podcast, perhaps. But
Praise God, we never succumb to this stuff.
yes, that there were some churches that just never participated in this madness. Because for those that did, it has not been an easy road back, if there is a road back at all. Because many of those churches are still doing this. And there are people who have just never returned, partly out of fear, and then partly also because it's comfortable to stay at home and do this on Sunday
Which one of you guys sent
So-
me something yesterday? It was a Catholic priest, I think it was one of you guys, sent me a text, and it was an article, but the picture that shows up on my text, and the priest is saying mass, still saying the mass with a mask on.
That must have been, might be you. It
Wasn't
wasn't
me.
me.
Maybe it was Rob. It's unbelievable. I'm thinking,
still doing it.
who,
They're still doing it.
what insane person is still doing that?
And what's worse than anything, right?
300 feet from the next person
Yeah.
in this church.
What's worse than anything is that they're doing it out of a missensed place of virtue and concern. It's so fake. There's nothing virtuous about it because there's nothing true about it.
No,
You can't separate.
never
from
was
virtue.
true.
Right.
Separate true from virtue.
And so, but many people are doing it. I don't care if the people on the street are doing it because they're not virtuous anyway. But I have a real problem when clergy, who are at least supposed to communicate virtue to people, are doing this all the time.
Encourage?
Yeah. And they're telling people to be afraid. They're telling people to just live in the machine, and don't ask questions, just fear, just conform. But are you comfortable? Are you okay? Yes.
I was at, I think I told Nathan this, a couple months ago, coach friend of mine was elected into the Rhode Island Class League Hall of Fame for all the sports, right? Coach Habrack. And this guy, whose brother was Sharon's coach, he's coached in college for 40 years. He goes to a notorious Unitarian church on the east side of Providence.
Oh.
And so he comes up to me. He goes, "Oh, I'm so glad you're here." He goes, "I got questions for you." He goes, "Are you meeting in person at church?" I was there in clericals, right? I go, "What?" He goes, "Are you meeting in person?" I go, We always have met in person." "Oh," he goes, "because we're getting ready to start meeting in person again. This is November." I go, "Seriously?" I go,
This past November.
November.
Wow.
3 months ago. Oh, so they were doing the mathematics about spacing and how, I'm thinking, so I said to the guy, I won't use his name, I go, "Do you live any other aspect of your life right now under these conditions? At work, at home, anywhere?" And he's looking at me like, "That's not a fair question." Because the answer is no.
Yeah.
It's virtue signaling.
Yes.
That's exactly what I said to him. I go,
Yeah.
it's BS, nonsense, virtue signaling. I said, he's on the committee. I said, "Go tell them they're all nuts and loons," because I go, it's stupidity. It's stupidity. I go, that's not community. It's like a creating perpetual. What is that?
It's like a thing.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And of course, my wife goes, "Yeah, I'm sure they weren't expecting any other answer from you other than that."
Yeah.
It's like, what about people aren't vaccinated? I go, "I'm not unvaccinated." I go, "I'm not vaccinated right now." I didn't know what he was going to do. Like,
He was dead by midnight that
walk,
day.
walk away, like, you put all these people in danger for the last 3 years. Like, parishioner's been dropping dead left and right. Whenever I preach, we lost a parishioner every single service.
At first you thought it was the sermon,
Yeah, you thought it was the hour-and-a-half sermon. No.
the COVID.
It was the COVID cancer. It just leaps out at you and
Yeah.
grabs you.
Yes.
Yeah. it's, yeah, it's, I don't know.
I think ultimately, like, fascinatingly and disappointingly, the paradox that we see is as time goes on, technology and the forces of the world call for humans to be further disembodied.
Yeah.
And our job as Christians, incarnational believers, is to call people back to the embodied life of the gospel. And those two things, a disembodied life and a life following the gospel, are incompatible with one another.
Nathan, we've talked about this. Your generation of leaders in the church, there's only one way this is going to work. It's a disassembling of the church as it is and a reassembling of it. That's it. It's a remnant. This remnant of, I just read an article on the Episcopal Church. The mode age of an Episcopalian is 69 years old. 69, right? And the mean age is like 59, 58, right? They're done, right? They're done. And there's nobody gets baptized, so they're done. So what you're going to do is you're going to spend your early years pastoring to people who are older, and then there's going to be a disassembling, right? Just like the great Ratzinger said, right? And it's the opposite of the Big Bang. It's going to go back to this center point of just a small nucleus, and then incrementally in new generations, it'll reflower out. That's what's going to happen to the church. Everything else, marketing, all of it's a waste of time. It is. It's a colossal waste of time.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what's happening. That's what's going to happen sociologically, and that's what mission-wise is going to happen to the church. So we're 2 to 3 generations away from the reemergence of a church that has staying power at congregational level into multiple generations.
Yeah.
Who wants to hear that?
Nobody. Yeah. Yeah.
How many other priests you know are going to say that?
Not many.
Who would come on this show and say that? They're not going to say that, right?
Yeah.
Because they all want to get paid. They all want to get to their pension. They don't care what happens after that, quite frankly.
Yeah.
They just want to get there, right? That's not what this young man has to face. And any of these, priests, young priests in the Orthodox tradition or the Catholic, Anglican, whatever, Baptist, Bob's Bible Chapel, whatever it is, it's the same challenges that they're going to have going forward. So if you're a priest in the next few years, it's tremendous challenges to try to hold together community and the demographics that's just shifting in age towards its end.
Yeah.
With no replacement generation to come, right?
Yeah.
And so your whole mentality, your whole agenda in ministry is different than it would be if you had multiple generation congregations.
Yeah.
Right? These are the things that we should be talking about. And thank God, at least we have the guts to come on this podcast and say them, because you're not going to hear it I'm convinced. I have a handful of friends I even talk reality in the church with. Just all blah, blah, it's just same useless stuff. How you doing? Great, we're doing great. Really? So you left half your members in the last 10 years and you're doing great over there? Right? Why would you say that? Because it's not true.
Right.
Right? But that's how the game's played. Right? So, and then we get stuck in this confessional defensism, right? We're doing better than them. Like, really? There's no flourishing going on anywhere.
Yeah.
Right? That's the reality because of all these things. All these things are true, right? And so AI could be an access point to get to the truth, couldn't it?
Absolutely.
And that's maybe that's the emphasis that should be put on technology. That it's an access point to get the saints to deal with reality, and so that they can transform their lives through the baptismal grace that's available to them, and actually be Christians, and to engage those around them with the gospel. But
I think that's well said.
otherwise, I think technology is just another easy out for people,
Sure.
right? Mm-hmm. Just like all the professional clergy will use technology and will grow.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good stopping point for our conversation. Really, bottom line is thinking Christians shouldn't go along blindly with the latest trends. You have to discern everything against God's truth. And whether it's AI or any other new technology, yes, it's a tool, but Christians, rather than being afraid of technology, need to be able to be sober-minded and think through the issues clearly and then apply a Christian worldview to that. We need to be able to at least understand what is happening in order so that we can speak to it and evangelize the next generation.
But thank God there's your generation. Seriously, where would we be without, you and I aren't going to go retroactive ourselves and be up to date on all this stuff, right? So Nathan and his colleagues, present and future, are essential to the life of churches, right? Whether it's your church or St. Mary's, right? Eventually, you have to engage this technology if you're going to move forward.
Oh, yeah.
And the longer you wait to do it, the quicker you die.
Yeah.
Right? And so, but you know, and I know, you can't get people to do anything in church, right? You can't get them to volunteer to do a thing. So to ask them to engage in these things is just another challenge, right?
Yeah.
And so, and you have to be smart. You have to understand all this stuff, right? And you take yourself, we take you for granted. You even take yourself for granted. Most people aren't smart. They're not, right? You're an engineer. What's the average guy who's self-proclaimed minister going to do, right? Going to find somebody to come in and do all these things. I guess it would be like with the music ministries were 20 years ago, right? Wouldn't you say? It's kind of a similar thing, right? You got, what are you? I'm the pastor of music ministry here at whatever.
St. Swithburn's.
St. Swithburn's Community Church in Warwick. It's bringing up pain for you, I can
Oh,
see.
goodness,
Yeah.
I've always joked and said that praise and worship bands were the best argument for atheism I've ever heard.
Yes, music. That's another podcast. Music.
Oh, sure, that'd be fun.
Down the road, sacred
Yes.
music.
Sure.
I think there were many worthwhile conversations there.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
on that uplifting note, we will conclude our episode today. Thank you so much for listening again. We appreciate your prayers and support. Please like and subscribe on YouTube and on your podcast app of choice. And we look forward to seeing you again next time. God bless.